Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to What Women Want with Judy Goss, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to What Women Want Talk Radio. I'm broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia, again this evening, and this is the home of our Spirit of Women conference in just a few weeks. And I'm also with my co-host, Kristin West, who's in our studio in LA, and we have yet another captivating show for you. As Kristin says, conversation that feeds your mind and energizes your spirit. Kristin, I love that and may have to adopt it for a new tagline or something.
I think that's great because that's exactly what we do each and every week. Our guests are entertaining, they're educational, and I know I've walked out of the studio week after week feeling uplifted and energized by someone who's taken the time to share their wisdom and knowledge with us. So I think that's an amazing way to describe the show too.
Totally. And you know what? It's all about, I think that people retain more when they're laughing and having fun. So I figured that we might as well try that on the show, right?
No, it's absolutely true. When you're laughing, you're having fun. That's really true engagement with the process. And I know so many of our guests are entertaining, and I'm really excited because our show tonight is mastering your mindset. We got to get in that mindset that we want to learn. And David Baer is here. He's our guest, a transformational mindset coach who Inc. magazine calls a leading expert on mindset. And we're really going to delve deep into that topic and how we can create more success, more money, and just plain more fun and good stuff in our lives.
Yeah, love it. Well, we're going to be bringing him on in just a few minutes. And in the meantime, I want to thank all of our listeners as we've been on the show for over 3 years and we've hit over 800,000 downloads. So if you haven't subscribed to us, please do so on iTunes or visit our archives on LA Talk Radio's website. As always, our prayers are thoughts are with us for the recent hurricane victims in the South, including right here in Atlanta also. And having been through 2 major hurricanes myself, I sincerely know how devastating it is. And recovery can be so exhausting and seem like forever. So if you're listening to this, and I urge you to please donate. We're working with Habitat for Humanity. That's one of the amazing foundations out there. $1, $5, it all makes a difference if we all do it, right? Okay, so who am I? Besides being one of the hosts of this awesome radio show, I'm also a TV host, a regular contributor on NBC and Fox. I'm back on Atlanta Company tomorrow morning on 11 Alive, plugging my Spirit of Women conference that's happening in 2 short weeks. I'm so excited. I hope you'll join us. I founded the company What Women Want Networking 6 years ago, and we're now hosting our first national conference. So we have several chapters spanning from coast to coast. I am also a St. Martin's Press author and a freelance writer for New York Lifestyles magazine. And I'm the mom of twin girls. Oh my gosh, they're now 13 years old. Can you imagine? Two teenagers and me in the household. My husband's about to kill me. And Kristin, my awesome co-host, is an award-winning actress, screenwriter, and producer. Her film Seeking Valentina was nominated for 2 awards at the Hollywood Dreams Film Festival in Las Vegas. A script she co-wrote, Likeness, was also nominated for a screenwriting award at this year's Fantastic Horror Film Festival. She can also be seen in the upcoming films The Spirit Room, Hell's Kitty, and The Lich, all due out later this year. So talented. Now, before we bring David on, let's talk about the Spirit of Women conference thing. I can't help myself. It's at the Westin Peachtree Plaza Hotel in Atlanta in 2 weeks. First of all, David Baer is keynoting it. Okay, and I'm thrilled to say we're going to be asking him about that in a minute. And Kristin, you're flying in from Hollywood to attend. How lucky are we?
Well, I'm lucky because I get to meet many of the guests that have been on the show. Of course, actually, you and I are going to see each other in person physically for the first time, which is excited. So I'm like jazzed to the max right now. I can't wait.
I know somebody asked me tonight at the event I was attending, so are you excited about the conference? And I just looked at them and I couldn't even talk with this huge smile from ear to ear on my face. And they said, well, I guess so. So, Kristin, like you said before, that our whole premise is a blend of business and personal development. And it's woven in, and this is what's happening at the conference with excitement and celebrities and fascinating keynotes like David, workshops and interactive panel discussion about branding and vision, and so much more. So go get your ticket now. Use the code Judy discount, that's JUDY discount, for $100 off the regular price of $350 just for listening to this show, spiritofwomenconference.com. And of course, I do what I preach. 10% of all tickets sold from here on out goes to Habitat for Humanity, who is also going to be sending someone to speak on behalf of the charity. I'm very excited about that. Things are heating up at the Spirit of Women Conference. We're a community of women that gets things done, let me tell you. So go get your ticket now. Kristin, I can't wait to hear David's secrets about how this mindset thing works. What about you?
I'm fascinated. I looked at David's website and was like, ooh, I need to talk to him. And I get the chance. And I'm so excited because everybody at the conference is too.
I know. And you know what? And like my conference where we blend a bunch of things in to really get the deepest knowledge that we can, David combines psychology with neurology, and his background is in Buddhism, and he's an interesting blend of philosophy, quantum physics, all kinds of religion. It just fascinating stuff.
It is. It very much is, and I'm so excited that we're going to get some time with him tonight.
All right, let's bring him on. David Baer is a leading expert in business mindset and strategy. David teaches business owners powerful methodologies in mindset and marketing to help them create extraordinary growth in their businesses and lives. David Baer Businesses is the fastest growing brand in the expert space, going from $0 to $2.2 million in 18 months. Wow, he's busy. David was recently named a leading expert in mindset by Inc. magazine, and his event, The Powerful Living Experience, was named a top 30 must-attend event for entrepreneurs. David teaches that in order to create what we want in our businesses and lives, we must align our thinking with the vision we want to create, as well as understand the fundamental marketing principles that dictate all business success. David has built and sold successful businesses for the past 20 years. His work as a founder and CEO of thechamberofcommerce.com helped tens of thousands of businesses master the mechanics and strategies necessary to grow and scale their businesses beyond seven-figure success. David is also managing partner of the Launchpad Agency, a digital advertising and marketing automation company that develops lead generation and conversion campaigns for small, medium, and enterprise businesses. What don't you do, David?
I don't know. It sounds like a lot when you put it that way, Judy. It's great to be here.
Well, that's your bio.
Yeah. No, I guess I've been busier than I thought. Hey, Kristin, how are you?
I'm well, and I'm so excited. Welcome to the show, David.
And you're always so relaxed, when we talk. It just sounds like you're not really doing anything, just hanging out. I love that about you. First of all, thank you for keynoting at our upcoming Spirit of Women conference. I am really excited to meet you and just even more excited to hear you speak. You're a legend in the industry.
Well, I don't know if I'm a legend yet, but we're certainly, bringing some great work into the world and helping entrepreneurs, really fulfill the vision they have for their lives and make an extraordinary contribution in the world. So that's a great thing.
You know what we say on What Women Want Talk Radio is for real. You're a legend in the industry. You became very successful very early on in life, a successful businessman. And then you got distracted. I was reading your story and fascinated because, when you go through the description of who you are today and what you're teaching, it was so opposite at one point for you with what you went through. And my true belief, and I said it tonight at the networking event, is that I feel like we can learn the most from people's stories and what they've been through and how they pushed through. So can you just kind of go, let's rewind a little bit and let's go over your background and what happened in your mid-30s and what you think derailed you in the first place?
Well, I think my story, all of our stories go back a lot further. And, what I've found is that it's not uncommon to be on this journey of feeling lost. And that was how I grew up. I mean, all the way back to second grade when my parents moved to a new school district, and all of a sudden the friendships I had developed fell away, and I, was a new kid in a new school. I felt like I didn't fit in. And in one way, shape, or form, we all adapt to that. Some people decide to get into, drugs and alcohol, which was part of my story. Some people decide that if they can just create extraordinary achievement in their life, then that's how they'll, find safety and security in life. So, I was always driven by achievement. I figured if I could just accomplish things, then it would be okay to feel good about myself, that people would love me. And I don't think that's an uncommon story, especially for those who achieve. And, I went away to Columbia University, got a great college education, played on the basketball team, started my first business right out of college. I was 22 years old, and through a series of circumstances, I was invited to start up the internet business for a luxury motorcycle brand called Ducati Motorcycles. So at a very young age, I had a lot of responsibility and performed well in my career. And so that unfolded, into my early 30s, where I had raised, millions of dollars from venture capital companies. I was a pioneer in the search engine optimization space. I was 32 years old, and I had built a company with 30 employees, but I was miserable. It was like I was always chasing this next level of success. If I could just get to the next level, then somehow life would be okay. And in the midst of all of that, not feeling good enough, not feeling like I was doing enough, not feeling like I was as far along as I should be, even though that type of thinking was in total defiance of the reality of my life. In all of that, and I talk about this in my story, I got into drugs, I got into alcohol, and fortunately I had a very early midlife crisis. At 32 years old, I woke up one day, I realized my life had become unmanageable, and that was 10 years ago. And that was the beginning of an awakening for me. It was the beginning of a really incredible journey that we'll talk a little bit about, and it was the seeds of what now has turned into my mission in my life. And the mission of our organization, which is to end suffering in the world, to restore intelligence to the planet, and to help individuals become powerful creators, because we now understand that that's what we are as human beings. So there's a lot in between, my my early midlife crisis and where we got to 10 years later. But that's my story. It was a journey of self-discovery and overcoming my own challenges, and through that, really finding myself and finding why I think I'm on this planet.
David, it's interesting you talking about how you were using overachievement to fill a void. It almost sounds like a snake that's eating its own tail in a way. How did you say of recovery that it's getting back something that is lost or stolen? How do we begin that process? How do we even awaken that I may need to recover something? How do you know?
Yeah, I think when I talk about recovery being getting back something that's lost or stolen, which is a perspective on 12-step recovery, it's really about reclaiming your personal power. So the question is, how do I know if I'm not fully stepping into my power in my life? And I think that's an easy question for people to answer. I think there's an immediate knowingness that there's something more here for me, that there's a gap between how I'm showing up in the world right now and what I know I'm capable of how I know I'm capable of being, right? And so if we're experiencing stress in our lives, overwhelm in our lives, anxiety in our lives, what we call suffering, I think that there's just this inherent understanding, this like longingness within us to figure out how to close that gap. But it's not a conversation that anyone's really laid out on the table and helped us become aware of. And so we go through life feeling like there should be more to life, feeling like we should be more present in our lives, not understanding why we're distracted, why we're not really engaged with the people who we care about, why we don't have the freedom that we want in our lives, struggling financially, and feeling like we're not good enough. So in all of that, I think there's an inherent sense that something is amiss.
It's interesting that you bring up distraction. And you said that you had been using distraction yourself, always on social media, obviously the use of substances. How do we know when we're distracting ourselves to death and choking off our relationships? How did you awaken to that idea of distraction as a way of avoiding a pain or
like what was the light bulb?
Yeah, what was the light bulb?
Well, for me, it was easy. While I'm running this company, managing a significant team of people, managing investor dollars, I was trying to stop drinking. I was trying to stop using drugs, and I couldn't. So I was trying to manage this process, and it culminated in one night. I don't often tell this story, but it culminated in one night where I went out, thought I had a couple glasses of wine. I came home the next day. For some reason, the evening before was a little bit foggy. And then when I came home from work that night, all of a sudden it rushed back to me that I had blacked out. Like the memories of the night came back to me. And so it was clear to me that, and I feel so blessed that it was clear to me, because for some people, they don't have that level of clarity even when they experience a bottom like that.
Yeah, really.
I was clear that I couldn't figure this thing out on my own. And I was really fortunate. My brother runs a really successful rehab and treatment facility out of Los Angeles. And I called him and I said, listen, like, I got a problem and I can't figure it out. I haven't really shared this with anyone. And so I started working a 12-step program. And so for me, there was a clear defining moment. And in my story, I talk about it. I was laying in bed that night after I came home from work, and all of a sudden, the memories that I had blacked out came back from the night before, and I started crying. And I asked myself a really good question, and I didn't realize what a good question it was at the time, but the question was, is this it? Like, is this really all there is to life? You know, that you work hard, you create some success in your life, but you still never feel like you're good enough. The pain is still there. The hole is still there. And we just try to manage that pain and that emptiness. Like, is this the way life works? Because when I looked around, this is kind of what everybody else was doing. I mean, maybe for them it was getting angry at their husband, or maybe for them it was eating, or maybe for them it was reality television. But like, when I really got present to it, I was like, wow, like there's a significant level of checking out taking place because there's a significant amount of pain that is not being dealt with.
Was it people that you were hanging out with, or with these people that you were hanging out with, or just like in general?
Everyone, in general, coworkers. I mean, we don't have to look far out into the world to see what I'm talking about. Like, for most people listening, they can just look at their own lives and go, yeah, I kind of relate to that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's this discomfort we live with on a daily basis, and we all find ways to cope with it. So I became really curious about, well, what's the discomfort? Like, where's it coming from? What is the essence of this thing that seems like it's just a part of life? And so when I asked myself that question, is this it? You know, there's an adage in scripture, which is ask and you shall receive. I started getting answers. And that was the unfolding of my story. I started working a 12-step program and learning the principles of 12-step. I happened to luck out and get a therapist that focused on the addicted brain. I became curious about how this incredible technology, the brain, worked. I was at an airport a week after I started working a 12-step program, and I had one of those moments where, like, a book on a shelf decided to develop a relationship with me, right? So I walk over and I grabbed the book, and it's this, I read the back of it, and it had 4 statements. It said, life is full of suffering. I was like, you got that right. So the suffering is going to happen to you. And I remember reading that, and it was such a personal relief because I thought there was something wrong with me. And it said there's a way out of the suffering was the 3rd statement, and the 4th statement said the way out of the suffering is the 8-fold path of virtue. And I was reading the 4 Noble Truths of Buddhism. And I was not into spirituality. I was not even into reading. And so there was this whole domino effect of things that happened where all of a sudden, instead of being an expert in this complex algorithm called search engines, I started seeing a really incredible algorithm that was talking about who we are as powerful creators, how we can get out of suffering, and actually how we interact with this extraordinary intelligence called life itself. And I became obsessed with it. And that's what I started the journey around 10 years ago.
Well, you're really fortunate that you found that out, you know, on your own. I think it's, being aware, walking by that book and being aware of the fact that that was a message and that you weren't trained yet really in mindset and the psychology of the brain and how it works and all that. I guess because you've been successful in other things, maybe you were open to that, but you're very fortunate that you could figure that out yourself. Right? I mean, I'd say most people wouldn't. I'm not a psychologist or by any means, but I would think most people can't get out of a situation like that. It sounded pretty dire, was it not?
It was, and this is the story that you hear consistently, especially people who have achieved healthy success in their life, and especially leaders in the personal development space. Is you hit bottom. You hit bottom, and there's nowhere else to look but up. And so you start asking the kinds of questions that you never took the time to ask. And life has this really extraordinary way of responding if you're willing to converse with it.
Well, that brings me to another point about, you talk about on your website, I'm not sure if it was I think it was on your website, I don't think it was a blog, about finding your authentic self. Now, what is a good sign that we're not being authentic in our lives or our careers? Is there some kind of telltale sign that we should, or a warning flag that comes up that we, should pay attention to?
Yeah, so what we're getting into now, and if I'm irreverent in any way, shape, or form in this personal development space, it's that for the last 40, 50, 60 years, we've been talking about transforming, but we haven't been transforming. Like, we've been in a conversation about personal evolution, and there hasn't been a step-by-step process to actually change the way you think, change the neural networks of your brain, change who you are in the world, and show up more powerfully. We've been incrementally transforming. And so the methodology that we teach is really a step-by-step process for becoming a powerful creator. And within that methodology, there's a distinction that we teach, which is that there's only two states of being. There are suffering states of being and beautiful states of being. And by suffering states, what I mean is stress, anxiety, overwhelm, jealousy, anger, like anything that doesn't feel good. And by beautiful states of being, I mean joy, curiosity, excitement, compassion, gratitude. Right? Now, no one ever taught us this, but it's very clear what state of being you're in now that I've defined that there are only two states of being. In addition to that, you're always in one state of being or the other, and you're never in both at the same time. So you're either in a suffering state or you're in a beautiful state.
You don't think there's like a neutral place where people are just kind of not anything or not feeling anything? Or that's suffering, maybe?
So, yeah, I mean, if we can describe that emotionally, but our experience is that at any moment you can check in with yourself and you can say, how am I feeling? You go, well, I'm feeling this way. Okay, great. Well, it's either a suffering state or a beautiful state. Now, you can move out of these states, in and out of these states in seconds, right? Because you can go from angry to excited to bored. But you're always in one state or the other. So your question was, how do we know if we're showing up authentically in our life? And the answer is, are you suffering or are you in a beautiful state? Because if you're in a suffering state, you're misaligned. And we can talk about what the cause of suffering is. There's actually only one thing that causes all suffering in our lives. But the emotional guidance system that we've been given is to notice whether we're in a suffering state or a beautiful state, because everything that we want is in a beautiful state. Creativity, inspiration, intuition, access to an intelligence greater than ourselves, the ability to be present. Suffering doesn't give us any of that. So all of our work is about helping people notice when they've moved into suffering and to teach them how to transition back into a beautiful state where they can powerfully create in all areas of their lives, their bank account, their business, relationships, their health, etc.
It's interesting that you kind of present it almost as a binary. I see a lot of people that are just be positive. And I was looking at your YouTube videos.
That's so one-dimensional, isn't it? Now that you're listening to David.
Well, it's true. And you, David, on one of your YouTube videos, I looked at your YouTube channel. You said you said that positivity is BS. Why can't we just be positive? I find it personally, just open forum. I find sometimes that people can hide behind positivity. It can become a bit saccharine. How do you feel about that, David?
Yeah, so there's some level of sarcasm around positivity being BS, right? But again, what personal development has been saying for the last few decades is that you should just focus on the positive. And the reality is that wherever you are in your life right now, 35 years old, 45 years old, 55 years old, however you're experiencing your life right now, you've been experiencing life that way since you were 4. So you've developed these deep grooves, these neural networks, these pathways in your brain. And if we really want to restructure those, right, if we want to be able to eliminate the patterns of thinking that are causing us to be stressed, or we want to eliminate that voice in the head that we wake up to every morning that tells us we're not good enough, or we're not going to be able to get it all done, or there's not enough time, because it's just a pattern of thinking, right? We wake up and there it is. The real way to create transformation in your thinking is not to try to avoid that. It's to actually be with it and to look at it as long as it takes to see that it's not true. Because the moment you see your own thinking, the thinking that is causing you suffering, as untrue, there's an immediate change in the brain and you can't unsee it anymore. Now, I'm going to give you a quick example. A client of mine that I work with, he's a 29-year-old young man, super successful, built a multi-$10 million business, started his first business when he was 19. He's Egyptian, he's Muslim. So he's never felt like he belongs. And he's out on a Friday night with a bunch of influencers. And so he calls me the next day and he says, listen, I moved into suffering last night. I had a hard time moving back into a beautiful state. I said, okay, walk me through it. And I haven't given you all these distinctions I'm about to give to you, but it'll close the loop on the story. He said, well, I moved into a suffering state and I looked at my thinking because I know that the only cause of my suffering is my own thinking. I said, that's right. What did you find? He said, well, what I found was that I was thinking that I don't belong here. All these other people are so impressive. They've accomplished so much. I don't fit in with them. I don't belong here. Now, he's had I don't belong here since he was a kid. He was different. And now he's perpetuated that into his adult life. He's been living through that lens forever, and it doesn't serve him well. He said to me, so I saw that what I was thinking was I don't belong here. And I looked at it because I know that what you teach me, Dave, is that if I'm thinking something that doesn't feel good, it's not true. And I don't want this to escape you. It's a very profound distinction. The only cause of your suffering is your own thinking. And the quality of that thinking is that it is not true. So he said, I know I'm supposed to see how it's not true, but I couldn't. I really feel like I don't belong. I said, all right, well, let's tackle this one. And I coach him. So I had a lot of different leverage points, right? Because if he feels this way, it's affecting him in all areas of his life. It's pulling him out of his business. It's pulling him out of his relationships. It's pulling him out of his ability to connect with these people. It's energetically draining. So we have to eliminate this I don't belong that is in him. Well, we don't eliminate it by all of a sudden having positive thoughts. We eliminate it by looking at the I don't belong here and seeing that it's truly unintelligent. And so I know that he believes in God, right? Now, this makes this a lot easier when people believe in a power greater than themselves, but we can still do this work even if someone doesn't. And I said, listen, you believe in a God, right? He said, yeah. I said, the all-knowing, all-powerful type of God? He goes, yeah, absolutely. I go, then how did he screw up on Friday night? He goes, what do you mean? I said, how did he put you in the wrong place? And he looked at me and it was like, I could literally see the demon exorcised from him. And he said, oh my God. I said, yeah, that's what we're talking about. He goes, I belong everywhere I am. That's transformation. He will never unsee that. He will never fall for this pattern of unintelligent thinking that is the only cause of his suffering, which is I don't belong. So that's the difference between what personal development has been and what we call Mindset 2.0. It's very simple practices, awareness, and distinctions that allow us to see the thinking that's been owning us, that doesn't serve us, or our mission, or our destiny in the world, or our family, and to eliminate it very rapidly.
Looking at our real truths.
Looking at it and seeing the untruth of your untruths. The moment you see that, like, it's like you come to me and you go, listen, Dave, my hand hurts. I go, okay, well, tell me about it. Is it throbbing pain, sharp pain, sharp pain? Been going on for a couple of weeks? Yeah. And I go, all right, Judy, look down. And you realize you're slamming your own hand in the door. The moment you see it, you stop.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the power of this, because it literally changes those neural networks of your brain, and then you immediately start showing up differently in life.
So you mentioned earlier that, if they believe in God, then it's a little easier to kind of, I think, grip onto something that they can believe in, right? What if they don't?
Yeah.
How do you, what's the, how does the coaching go that?
Yeah. So the truth is that there is an extraordinary intelligence that is operating the system of life around us, right? We can see it. It's not probable that the entire system of this planet functions in harmony the way that it does. So for us, it doesn't matter if you believe in God, or if you call it the universe, or if it's Allah, or if it's higher power, but there's an intelligence at work, and there's a relationship between us and the intelligence, right? Based on what we believe, the intelligence responds to that and brings us circumstances in our life that correlate with what we believe. So, and we've all experienced this. We call it coincidence. So at some point, there needs to be some form of adoption of an acknowledgement that life is always working for you in miraculous ways. And there are some universal laws and principles we teach. We don't call them God laws. They're laws of intelligence, just like laws of gravity. It's just the way that life on this planet functions and the way that we interact with that function. Now, if you're not willing to adopt those things, then it makes it very difficult, because now you think everything depends on you. And our experience of life is that it doesn't. You do 50% of the work, and life responds and does its part.
Right. So that's part of what you teach them, is that something really that they can't see is out there.
Yeah. And we'll say, listen, try it on, right? Like, let's consciously make some decisions about what will happen in your life. I've been in a relationship going on 5 years now with my beautiful girlfriend, who's also the president of our company. And she's from Bogota. And a week before I met her, I made a decision I was going to meet a beautiful Colombian woman. So you can deny the coincidence in your life. At some point, it starts to feel like you're defending stupid, right? But there's a direct correlation between what we think and how life corresponds to us. Now, we go into extraordinary detail around building this case for people because it's important to understand. But this is what Napoleon Hill was talking about in Think and Grow Rich. We've just taken it to the next level by understanding how the brain works, and by also understanding how the physical world around us works at a very scientific level.
Now, is this a rapid thing when you have that aha moment, or is this an incremental process, or is it sort of in waves? Is it? Yeah,
so it depends. It depends on, when we teach our methodology, and then people use the methodology for themselves. And like anything that you start doing that's new, it takes a little time to get good at it. I've been doing this for a while. Not only did I build David Bayer through this process, but I'm helping so many other people transform into really becoming phenomenons in their life, like what they're really capable of. And so I've gotten good at it. So it can be instantaneous if you truly see how unintelligent the thinking that's taking place for you is. So let's take indecision, for example. Indecision, a lot of people struggle with indecision. I don't know if I should do this or if I should do that. Well, behind that is a belief about decisions. So what indecision is really about, it's the belief that there's a right or wrong decision. I would suggest that that's not accurate. I would suggest that you can evaluate the data and that you make a decision and you can make it right. That the moment you make a decision, it gets the intelligence of life itself working in extraordinary and miraculous ways to try to make the path that you chose lead you to the destination that you're striving towards. And that there are many, many, many roads to the top of the mountain. And that the worst thing you could possibly do is not move forward at all in what we call indecision. And so when I got really clear on that, when I was like, oh my God, there's no such thing as a right or wrong decision. Like, this indecision thing is man-made. There's no indecision out in nature. The squirrel doesn't sit there and go, is it this tree that has the nut, or is it that tree that has the nut? Let me sit here and think about it, right? So man has designed a number of things like overwhelm. Does not exist in nature. Indecision does not exist in nature. So we've architected these things. And actually the only bad decision you could make is to be in what? Indecision. I'm not saying, again, go do heroin. That's a bad decision, right? I'm talking about being reasonable here.
Right.
We work with entrepreneurs all day long who are productive for 10, 15, 20 hours a week because they're spending so much time in suffering.
I would imagine after you get to that clarity point, you would actually have to probably do a deeper dive into your decisions you made or didn't make, your relationships with your significant other, your children, your coworkers, and I imagine there would have to be some reframing of your personal story for your life's narrative to make more sense with the new paradigm and the shift in thinking. I would think there would have to be a process of acceptance and forgiveness and also being compassionate towards the less evolved self. How do people move through that? How have people that you've worked with kind of moved into that part of the journey with you?
God, it's such a great question and observation. The identity that we teach is that of a powerful creator, right? That we structure part of this like the broad strokes of the identity for people. We go, listen, you just have not been involved in this conversation. It doesn't mean that the conversation doesn't exist. Let me take a moment to explain to you what you are, right? You are a powerful creator. You are the individual expression of an infinite intelligence in the world. And you've been extraordinary technology, a goal-achieving technology called the brain. It resides between your ears, and it operates off of what you believe. And so once we set that stage, and we go, wait a minute, I get to create whatever I want in my life as long as I start making different decisions, as long as I can go, there is no right or wrong decision. Or I'm going to build a 6-figure business over the next year. I don't know how, but I don't need to know how. I just need to decide. I need to create the image in my mind because that's how the brain works. It creates this extraordinary blank canvas for people, and they now have so much more freedom. But yeah, part of that process is looking at everything you've been believing. We have a blueprint. It's called the decision matrix. So we take people through every major area of their life, and we have them write out what they believe about it. What do you believe about relationships? Well, there's no good men or women out there. That's a blueprint for someone who's single. Because the brain is a goal-achieving machine. It goes, yep, you got it. No good men or women out there. All we're going to notice is all the problems. We're going to skip noticing all the people who would be a perfect partner for you. And in the quantum reality, we're not going to create any coincidences for you to meet anybody who you could have a great relationship with. That's how powerful this thing called the brain is. So we take people deep into looking at their lives, looking at the decisions they've been making unconsciously, acknowledging and realizing the fact that they are completely incongruent with the life they're telling us they want. And then we teach them why they should give themselves permission to make new decisions. Can I really just make a new decision that like money flows to me, or I can trust people? Or yes, you can, because you really just decided that you couldn't when you were 3 years old and confused. But what's happened is it's wired your brain. And it's kind of like when someone gets attacked by a dog at 4 years old. Every new dog they experience is a dangerous dog, no matter what it is. And the brain will actually just notice or interpret the movements of the dog as dangerous. So you've been living in this psychocybernetic loop over and over and over again, like that movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, because no one ever told you how to use your technology, right? So we teach people how to use the technology, and then they get to define who they want to be. Who do you want to be? You get to do whatever you want. You get to be whoever you want. So oftentimes people go, well, I want to become a better dad. I realize that I've been caught up in all this suffering stuff and I'm missing the magic moments with my kids. Okay, great. So let's decide that you're going to be a better dad. Then we go, what does that look like? Let's define that.
It's interesting.
It's a powerful process.
It's interesting because, Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. That's what everybody quotes of Descartes. But the other important thing that Descartes said is, I am deceived, therefore I exist. And there's these layers of deception, whether we have been deceived by others or we have deceived ourselves, that we sort of muddle through. And even at times, the reality that we perceive, we forget, we don't live every moment, understanding that we're revolving around the sun at this colossal speed in a galaxy that's moving at this amazing speed, and that light is moving at a speed. It just is. And our brains don't kind of encapsulate that experience for us instead of having the full impact of the experience. And I think...
Yeah, we live a myopic existence. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we live in an illusion of what we think life is. I mean, I got really present a couple of years ago. It changed my life. I was walking on the beach one day, and I was, in the middle of engaging with my work, which is what I do. Like, I look at it as something outside of myself. My best friend is my work. And so I'm working with the work, and I got really clear that there's no problems. Ever. There are no problems in my life. That every time something shows up, it's a redirection into something better. It's a reflection of a limiting belief that I have. There's no problem ever. So now I'm able to live pretty consistently in a beautiful state. Suffering still shows up because these patterns of thinking show up. But no matter what shows up in my life, I'm like, awesome. Now, there are challenging times, right? Go ahead.
I'm just curious because you sound so aware of your environment and obviously, what you're thinking and doing. When we become that hyper aware, do we start to go over to the other side sometimes and start to, just overthink it too much? I mean, I feel like when I'm more aware of things, I'm more sensitive. So then that takes me to the suffering side.
Yeah, so this is what's so fascinating about this time that we're having this conversation. What's happened now, because there's been an evolution of self-awareness. Like 15 years ago, I would have said I wouldn't have said self-awareness, but had I, maybe the three of us wouldn't even know what we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And Eckhart Tolle wrote The Power of Now, and now we're all talking about the ego and the voice in the head. It was in like 2002. So, but what's happening now is we're stuck in this space where you have an entire generation of people who are becoming self-aware, but they don't know what to do with what they're becoming self-aware of. They're in purgatory, right? So you're aware that you don't feel good enough, but you don't know what to do about it.
And that's where you come in.
Well,
I mean, seriously, you seem like you guide people to take that awareness and to another level, correct?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it's that next level of awareness, which is now knowing what to do with what you're becoming aware of, so that if there are patterns of thinking that you've been engaged in for many, 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 many years that don't serve you well, we eliminate those patterns of thinking and we transform them into something that is congruent with powerfully creating in all areas of our lives.
And these methodologies that you show people and teach people, they're all a combination of what you've learned over the years from all of those endless subjects of religion and philosophy and neuroscience and psychology. Is this something that you came up with and you combined all of that experience and knowledge together?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the reasons why it's so steeped in science and how the brain works and quantum theory is because I didn't grow up in a faith-based family. So my partner, who I mentioned to you before,
that's
Carol,
interesting.
She's always had faith in God. So I created a God surrogate until I actually saw God working in my life, and that was science. So I built a logical foundation for why I can just start making new decisions and change my life. And in that, I gave myself permission to make new decisions. That money flowed to me, that I could meet an extraordinary girlfriend, right? That I could build a company with amazing team members, that I didn't need to do it all on my own. I don't have overwhelm in my life anymore because I'm clear that overwhelm is this belief that I somehow have to get it all done in an amount of time that is not possible, otherwise my life will be ruined. That's overwhelm. The reality is I need to get done what I can get done today, and life will take over tomorrow. there's this beautiful correspondence. So,
David, you have a book called Mind Hack. Can you tell us about that book?
It's a Mind Hack introduces 4 core principles. It introduces the power of decision, the power of clarity, the power of gratitude, and the power of questions. And it also talks about how to eliminate fear in your life. And the power of decision is really pivotal. Oftentimes when we tell people, listen, you just need to start deciding into your life. I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to go start my own business, right? Where people normally get stuck is how. So they go, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how I'm going to manage the finances, so I won't decide that I'm going to leave my business and go start a business that I love, leave my job and go start a business that I love. And there was a study done at Harvard in 2009. They brought in piano players to play the piano, and as the pianists played the piano, they watched what parts of their brain lit up. And then they had the piano players just imagine playing the piano and the same parts of the brain lit up. So this technology doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality, and it operates off of images. So the moment you make a decision that you're going to leave your job and go start a business, you actually create a memory of something that has not happened yet. And it's that brain change that gives you the how, gives you the thoughts and ideas. You start to see things differently. You start to create coincidence in your life. So most people get stuck with the how in their life. And when you really understand how the technology works, you don't worry about the how anymore. You just go, what do I want to create?
Is that what we're going to be talking about at the Spirit of Women Conference, or do you have a special focus at the Spirit of Women Conference?
Yeah, at the Spirit of Women Conference, we're going to talk about 2 things, because everybody wants to create more powerfully in their lives. And everybody wants to eliminate any of the suffering in their life. Like, isn't that what we want? If you could live your life and not suffer, and you could create whatever you wanted, wouldn't that be heaven on earth?
I would think
totally.
So.
Yeah. So we're going to cover 2 sides of the coin at the conference. We're going to say, listen, let's talk about how we create powerfully in our life. And that really is about the power of decision. Not needing to know the how, having clarity, making decisions, and having faith. And then we're going to talk about how to eliminate the suffering, because you can't powerfully create while you're in suffering. So really the biggest problem is suffering. The automatic patterns of thinking that cause stress, anxiety, overwhelm, not good enough, we must eliminate those, because when we eliminate those, we move back into a beautiful state. And especially if we understand these laws and principles of creation, you can create whatever you want. And that's how we went to, like 3 months later, and it's outdated, we went to $0 to $3 million in 20 months. And I'm not saying that to impress anyone. We had a team of 3 people, me, my girlfriend, and my marketing director. But we eat our own dog food, right? So when I'm on stage, and I'll ask this at the conference, I ask people, if you were to add up, and this is actually a question for both of you, if you don't mind sharing, but if you add up all the time on an average day, and you condensed it down, that you spend in suffering, right? Suffering is stress, anxiety, overwhelm, comparing yourself to other people, criticizing other people in your head, criticizing yourself, being in indecision, worrying about what you should have done that you didn't do, etc. How much time is that on an average day? I'm not saying you're not functional, right? You're showing up and you're doing your thing and you're going to an event, you're running a radio show. But how much time is that going on in the background?
It depends on if I have a phone call with my lawyer or CPA that day.
and unfortunately, speaking of time, we only have about a minute left, and we sat here and let you talk because we couldn't stop you because we're so fascinated. But if anyone wants to hear more of you and meet you in person, I urge them to come to the conference. And I am just so excited that you are such a huge part of this conference, and you're talking about what we just spoke about, because I could sit here for hours and just listen to you. I mean, it's just fascinating, and I appreciate you coming on the show and being so candid also with, your story and what you went through, because like I said, that's how we learn the most. And David, people can find you on davidbayer.com, BAYER.com, correct?
Correct. And then we have our event once a year, which is powerfullivingexperience.com. And that's really 3 days to go deep on everything that we talked about.
What a dream. What a dream 3 3 days that would be. Well, thank you again. We appreciate having you on the show and illuminating us with all of your knowledge and wisdom. It's just blowing my mind already. And I can't wait to
Judy,
continue.
Appreciate it. Can't wait for the event. I'll see you in a
Yeah,
couple
I
of
can't
weeks.
wait for the conversation to continue. So thank you. And everyone else next week, join us for the motivating and inspirational Catherine Marshall, the founder of Simple Fat Burn. You won't believe this woman. She is terrific. Randy Levin, a transitional change coach. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking about changes. So good night, everyone, and see you next week.
You're listening to What Women Want with Judy Goss, only on LA Talk Radio.